Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, Trevor?
What is going on? Today we're going to be talking all about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Cam and I went and saw this Saturday night. Was it Saturday? No, Friday night. Friday night.
Friday night, yep.
Yeah, it's been a couple nights now. We saw it Friday night. So we're going to do, as we typically do on these shows, we'll do kind of our spoiler-free thoughts first, and then we'll dive into full spoiler territory. And I'll have that all time-stamped out and everything in the show notes. Before we hop into that, though, a little bit of housekeeping. You can go catch That Bond Show every Saturday over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. We are rounding down. Logan and I are about to record the Casino Royale episode. So we're and the episode that just went live is our World Is Not Enough episode. So we're almost done with the Pierce Brosnan era, and then we have, those 5 Daniel Craig ones to go. So stay tuned for that as we wind that show down. Also, shout out to Cameron's ongoing series every Friday evening on our YouTube channel, Friday Night Dying Light, where Cameron continues to make his way through the campaign of Dying Light 2 with, the occasional distraction and sidetracking into side missions. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. And without further ado, let's dive into spoiler-free thoughts of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Cam, I will throw it to you first. What did you think of this one?
So before I get started on my personal thoughts, I want to make sure it's very clear. Things that you need to have watched before you see Multiverse of Madness to get everything you need out of it. Doctor Strange, number 1, of course, but also make sure you watch WandaVision. I think in order to get kind of like the full stillness out of this movie, you definitely need those 2 in your under your belt before you go in and watch this. I put that on top here because if you're listening to this and wondering, hey, what should I do? That's number 1. That's something you should want to get that out of the way. My personal thoughts on this movie, absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I mean, I granted, take this with a grain of salt. I was a major fan of the original Doctor Strange. I'm a fan of Doctor Strange comics. I love some of my favorite stuff was getting to see some trippy acid trip level stuff that you get to see in the comics on screen in the first film. And getting to kind of see this film as a film that is dedicated and meant to be a great homage to kind of the weirder and darker stories of Doctor Strange from the especially 70s, getting into the 80s, where you get into a lot more of some darker stuff with Strange in the comics books wise. This just absolutely hit on every level for me. I love Elizabeth Olsen as the Scarlet Witch. I think that she has been such an incredible part of the MCU and such an underutilized part. And I think that was definitely shown extremely well in WandaVision, how much she essentially is able to carry in her own right, in storytelling in the MCU. So it's absolutely fantastic. I highly suggest people go watch it. I cannot emphasize enough how much I enjoyed this film. There are definitely some problems with it, some I won't say flaws, but some serious dents and blemishes. As far as because it's not perfect. And it's definitely, and I will put this out there, Sam Raimi directed this movie. It is a Sam Raimi ass movie. To the extreme on some levels, at certain points, it's just holy crap, that's just such a Sam Raimi move to do. Even down to the point of somebody opening their eyes after being after being knocked out. It's just the way that it's done there is so different than anybody else does anything in the in the MCU. Sam Raimi just has such a special touch to it, so I'm a fan of that sort of stuff. A lot of that campiness. So if you're not, make sure you're ready for that when you go see it.
Yeah, I will say, kind of building on that point, I'm less of a fan of Sam Raimi, and while I didn't like dislike the movie, it's definitely one that I probably, unlike a lot of other Marvel movies, I'm probably not gonna like race out to see this in theaters again or anything like that. I saw it the one time. That's probably enough for me. I do think it is a great, continuation, it is an interesting continuation of Wanda's story, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in our spoiler stuff. Um, I had watched the first Doctor Strange the night before we went and saw it, so that was like fresh in my mind. And I actually found myself a little let down in the differences of effects. I think the first one played with very cool visuals and had like such a very fun and interesting style. And it's not that the second one doesn't have an interesting style. It's just that it didn't have that style. It goes in a very different direction,
Mm-hmm.
being leaning into Raimi's kind of looks and feels a little bit more. And I found myself kind of wishing for more of the first movie's aesthetic, because I think that in particular sets itself apart in a cool and interesting way. This one sets itself apart in a very different way, which some people will really dig. I'm not a huge horror guy already, so the Sam Raimi campy horror of it, and regular jump scares that we got through the movie. There were many times where I was just kind of like looking down, like, I know a jump scare is coming. I don't want it to happen and hit me in the face. And so I kind of found myself like looking away from the action multiple times, because like fortunately he is very transparent in setting up those jump scares, I think, a lot of the time. So I was able to adeptly kind of navigate the film. But I think that's another reason that I'm not going to be like super eager to jump back out and see this, is because I just like, even though I know now where those beats are going to happen and stuff, it's still just not my um kind of a good time. That said, really great performances all around. Shout out, of course, to Benedict Cumberbatch. Although we'll talk about this a little bit more, I guess, in spoiler. Like, Benedict Cumberbatch almost felt like a supporting character in a Doctor Strange movie for me, which I was like, I kind of wish he had more to do in his own movie. But Elizabeth Olsen was great as Wanda. Special shout out to Xochitl Gomez, who I found out is like just turned 16, so very young
Yeah,
actress
she's
to get to jump into this fun role in the MCU. Um, and Benedict Wong continues to be fun anytime Wong pops up. So shout out to that. So yeah, I think like overall, I didn't hate my time with it. And knowing it's a Sam Raimi ass movie kind of going in, I was like, okay, I'm preparing myself for that. I'm going to like lower the bar so the movie can like, jump over it. And I think that worked for me. Um, uh, it definitely had its Raimi-isms. Danny Elfman's score, I had heard people kind of talk about it before the film, and I was like, how much is like it really going to make an impact? And it was definitely noticeable. In some moments, I thought in very, very cheesy ways that didn't work for me. But I get why people are latching onto it, and I get the people who really love it. I get why they love it. It just didn't, it wasn't always a hit for me. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it was, it's a fun continuation of the MCU overall. I'll be curious to see it. It definitely kind of tease up some possible things for future MCU stuff, which again we'll dive more into in spoilers. Um, and I think at the end of the day, I think it did tell a good possible middle chapter here for Doctor Strange, kind of like continuing his story from the first movie. Sorry. And then yeah, it'll be interesting to see where his character goes from here. Whether that's in Doctor Strange 3 or in just other aspects of the MCU. I'll be curious. I'll also be curious how frequently we end up visiting the multiverse based on kind of the course of this film. But yeah, overall, I'm certainly cooler on it than you are, Cameron. But it's definitely it's not a bad time, or I didn't think it was a bad time. But it's just gonna be one of those ones that I'm not super like. I'm way more eager to see Thor: Love and Thunder, like possibly a couple times before coming back and revisiting this one anytime soon. So,
Well, sure, but I mean that's almost like comparing apples and oranges to me.
yeah, sure.
Because there's honestly, there's no way that anyway, well, like I've said it before and I'll say it again. Thor Ragnarok's my favorite MCU movie, so
yeah,
like I'm stoked beyond be out of my mind for Thor: Love and Thunder. Just look at our D+ show for Moon Knight that we just did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we'll dive now into spoiler-filled thoughts. So this is your last chance to duck away if you're interested in going to see this, and then yeah, feel free to come back and hear our spoiler-filled thoughts after you've seen the show. Or if you don't care, then stick around. Sure. So Cam, I will throw it to you again first here. Any particular spoilery things you want to dig into first?
I think the first thing I want to talk about is so I was talking to my brother and my brother-in-law and my sister because they saw it Thursday night, which was fun for them. Like also as a head, like so they went to the local Cinemark that's right by my house, and they said it was interesting to go to a movie again on a Thursday night because Thursday night openings, like if I don't know if you recall, but like those were like the things to do in high school and college.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the MCU movies that were coming out.
I mean, when I was in high school and college, Thursday night movies weren't a thing yet. It was still maybe midnight screenings.
There you go.
But
fair.
yes, yeah, I do remember
the
Friday 12:01 screenings. In particular, I remember seeing Avengers that first night. Over there it's like Tempe Marketplace, and then seeing it like two more times that weekend. Like I saw it Friday night, I saw it Saturday, and I saw it Sunday, with like different people each time. It was a ton of fun. But yes, the certainly nowadays the Thursday night screening, and I oftentimes will try and go and see it like a Thursday night screening on a big opening thing. It becomes trickier now that we do basically that D+ show Thursday nights. We record that, so sometimes I'll basically say, "Hey, let's record on Wednesday instead," so I can go see the Thursday night screening of a thing. But yeah, it's definitely when you get, I think, the most rabid audiences out there, because they're the ones that are like the ones that want to see anything before anything gets spoiled.
Yeah. So my brother-in-law and sister went to see it, and something they said was interesting that they haven't seen in a while is every single theater except one was playing Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
And like they were all packed. So like that makes me happy because we're kind of like getting back to seeing like more, like people are going out and seeing more films again, which is just good for the industry. And
they're definitely going out and seeing Marvel fills or like,
oh, that's true,
Spider-Man No Way Home. Yeah.
So I'm just happy to see that. So I think I think the box office numbers that have come out are really healthy for Doctor Strange, which is good to hear and good to see, because sometimes it's been so long since we saw the original Doctor Strange in theaters. Like he has shown up ever since his original film, he has shown up in so many other films as an ensemble or a supporting character, that getting him in his own movie again, I can understand some of the criticism that's like he doesn't take enough of a starring role. I disagree. I think that he's much more of a like, it's not that he's a supporting character so much as he is the support of this film. Like he is the kind of tent pole, like everything is wrapped around. And it's kind of like his interpersonal relationships with people that are, I think, at the emotional core of this film. Whether it's his relationship with Christine, which is like, one thing I want to say is a lot of people I don't think people remember where Doctor Strange is in his career slash life. Um, at the end of Doctor Strange 1, he's named Sorcerer Supreme. He's the guardian of the Eye of Agamotto, which houses the Time Stone. He has moved from being, I have this tremendous responsibility as a doctor and as a saver of lives, to I have a tremendous responsibility as the Sorcerer Supreme. And that's kind of like his guiding thing, is like he is the Sorcerer Supreme and he's dedicated himself to that role and that idea. And something that I think we get introduced to in No Way Home is a Doctor Strange that is out of sorts in a large way. To the point where a lot of times people said in the trailers, they theorized this isn't the actual real Doctor Strange to them, because he's a bit more flippant and willing to bend the rules and stuff in regards to helping out Spider-Man. And
that Doctor Strange was the Doctor Strange from No Way Home that people were suspecting wasn't really the Doctor Strange.
Yeah, because of how it seemed how different it was. But I think that tells us. So in No Way Home, we're reintroduced to Doctor Strange. He's no longer the Sorcerer Supreme because that title got passed to Wong when he got snapped. And it's not like he gets that title back now that he's returned back to life. It's like that's not the way. It's very clear that's not the way that the Sorcerer Supreme works. And so you have he's the guardian of New York, like he's in charge of that facility. But it also is interesting because we hear later in the film, like that day when you said you were happy waking up in that haunted house, with and basically this entire call out that you're at this point, Strange sees his life kind of as having lesser value as far as the quality of his life, as far as what he's in charge of and responsibilities. I don't think that's the right way to phrase it. I think I misphrased it there. But the idea basically is that Doctor Strange is a kind of person, it's very clear, that thrives off of responsibility and being in control. Christine has that great line of saying,
you always have to be the one holding the knife.
Holding the knife, yeah.
Yeah. The repeated phrasing of people asking Strange if he's happy, and he just kind of always does the rote, yeah, I'm happy. In the same way that anybody, how are you? Oh, I'm good. It's but are you? What's going on? You've been dealing with a lot. There's a lot of, in this, I think it was interesting that kind of kept coming up as almost are you really good? I think you need to probably examine that rather than just give the stock answer you give, because you don't have the job that you didn't come back to the job that you were expecting you'd have. You don't have the girl. You're going to her wedding at the beginning of this movie. Things aren't, it's not that they're bad for Doctor Strange, but they're not where he had maybe seen his life going pre-blip. And pre-Thanos. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting little element that gets kind of flirted with throughout the film. And obviously circling back around to it at the end and him and Wong having that very candid conversation of yeah, you I'm supposed to be happy because I'm out there saving the world, and you think that would make you happy. And it's not really. Why? It doesn't necessarily, happy is completely disconnected from that kind of thing. Whereas I think by the end of the film, I think something that makes him happy is kind of the fatherly role he took on with America Chavez, and kind of also the willingness to let go of Christine, and not and realize that. I think part of it is because we see that across multiple universes, they just never end up together. I think he kind of is able to come to terms with that in a way of well, maybe it's not just me. Maybe there are cosmic forces at play that that say I'm destined for a different path. And I think there's a very nice moment for him as a character of no longer holding on to that broken watch and the
Mhm.
symbolism and the resonance of that, and basically going through, especially in the, I mean, like from a very practical sense, the fact that he has like dexterous enough fingers to be able to repair that watch is a, you know, that's a leaps and bounds. Like he's probably not ready to do surgery anytime soon, but it's him kind of like restoring and returning to himself. Um,
Mhm. It's finding peace at it's like he easily could have used magic to repair that watch at any point in time,
mhm.
but he never did. And the fact that he's willing to do it, but not just do it, but do it with his own hands, which means like he was like he has had years. I loved how they showed off the like because we see his like magically like reinforced hands all the time.
Mhm.
But to see like the X-rays to remember, oh yeah, his hands are super jacked up.
Yeah. And we get it in that scene in particular is like the one where I noticed it, where we got like close-ups on his hands and we can see like all of the scars and stuff for all the surgery that they did to try and just like get his hands back in some kind of working order.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
almost like the scar tissue is almost like ley lines for his magic or something. In
Oh,
a
that's cool. I like that.
in a cool little interesting way. But yeah, so I thought that was like a nice, again, like that's kind of what I was alluding to in terms of like this is a nice middle chapter, because it lets him kind of put that, you know, part of his history behind one thing. And I didn't like necessarily jump on it to call it out in the spoiler free stuff, but I think the Doctor Strange centric episode of What If is also, I think, an interesting companion piece to this,
That's true.
because it toys with some of those same themes and ideas um, in
I
cool
will
ways.
say when we go to the what are they what's the phrase they use for when we go to the incursion uh reality
Hmm.
where I totally 100% thought that was going to be
Yeah.
the what if one. I totally thought that that was it. To the point where like I was really looking forward to seeing like super like fucked up Strange from
Hmm.
that episode. And it's cool. Like I still like the Strange we got because the
It's
Strange we got was
Yeah, that one's definitely like he has gone through some of the same journey as that Doctor Strange, clearly,
yeah,
dabbling in much more of the dark arts. But yeah.
which I loved. I honestly found myself so engaged by so yeah, like but as somebody who at my current point in life is like I'm in between jobs. I'm not really sure what direction my life is going to be headed. Like there's a lot of like my life is kind of like up in the air. Like I related a lot with Strange in this movie.
Hmm.
Like a whole lot. Like yeah, my life hasn't really gone the way that I thought it would. I thought that things would be different. Not like just not even taking to mention because Doctor Strange came out in what 2016, the original Doctor Strange.
Maybe I don't know.
I
I'm
think it
not.
came out in 2016. Maybe it came out earlier, but it might have actually come out earlier. Now that I think about it, it might have come out in 2014, maybe. Um, Either way, like I can't, like I walk away from the original Doctor Strange as like how many years ago was that?
Yeah, it
Like
was 2016. You're right.
2016. Great. I wasn't out in 2016. I anticipated my life would be very different in 2016 than it is now in 2022. In 6 years, my life has irrevocably changed in ways I could never have imagined. Not to mention, if you want to take it in more of like even within the MCU timeline, it's been a decade for Strange since the events of his first film.
I mean, it's tough to identify like when, I think timeline, or at least I don't know off the top of my head timeline wise when that first one happens and how long he's Sorcerer Supreme before getting blipped away for 5 years. So yeah, I mean, and I feel like post blip we're still like in that first year or so post blip, year or two post
Yeah.
blip. Um, so yeah, it's probably been, you know, 7 or 8 years ish. Obviously he was, you know, like a bunch of that was, you know, a snap, and he's gone and back, and he doesn't, you know, he doesn't feel the weight of those years. Um, you know,
But
maybe he had some cats and a brother die too, but
that scene was so good. Once
yeah.
like that's quintessential Raimi humor. Here's a weird dude who values his cat's lives over his actual brother's life. What I thought was interesting
not
about
even a
that,
weird dude. Like the guy that was set up as like his professional antagonist in the first film, um, yeah, just like completely defeated and destroyed and devastated. That while he was gone, he was also gone for 5 years in the blip. He came back and yeah, his cats had died and his brother had died. It was fun that it was a fun goof that he introduces that information in that particular order.
I think an important thing to point out is, so in the original Doctor Strange, we're told that you can only look into the future up until your death.
I mean, yeah, or like the Ancient One. Basically, that's how she details what she has seen. I don't like. I don't know if they explicitly say that that's like always the case or whatever, but to the point that you're getting at, yeah, I think it is interesting that of those 15 million, potential futures that Strange saw, the one that leads to the events of Endgame is certainly one in which he was living. So maybe one of those other paths, or and we kind of get the idea floated that other paths were available to them, and Doctor Strange just would have had to die or something like that.
But it also brings up the question of like, because he can only see up to the point where he dies. So does he only find out if they're successful, like in the one that he survives? And is that, and like that one requires Tony Stark to like, requires everybody to get blip.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and Wanda points it out too. She says, in how many of these how many times you looked into the future, like did Vision have to die? There's a lot of great. Oh no, maybe actually,
I don't.
Sorry, I think
I don't remember her introducing that, but I did think it was an interest because she very much confronts him with the idea that he gave Thanos the Time Stone, directly leading to Vision's death.
That's
like directly leading to like the Thanos being able to turn back time after Wanda had just killed her husband, and I think that was an interesting element that I definitely hadn't thought about in the lead up to this, where like I had a glimmer of a hint that it was going to be a Strange versus Wanda kind of movie, but they I think did a good enough job teasing other potential threats that it could have been a team up with them. So the fact that it is a violent battle between the two of them, and there is a history that like Wanda is clinging to and like furious about, I think helps feed that in a way that I hadn't necessarily thought about. Yeah.
No, I love that. Sorry, I think I kind of like filled in some mental gaps for myself with the thing about him, like combining the kind of like the future that Strange gets Tony and everybody to agree to is one where he survives. So it's like, not only is it the one where he survives, but Tony sacrifices himself. Vision's brutally murdered by Wanda in an attempt to stop Thanos, only to have the Time Stone revert it, and Thanos takes it anyway, and causes and it's a very catastrophic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings up the question, is that the only one that he survived through? So he knows that they were successful. Was it the only one that he knows that they survived that he himself could also survive? And it brings up an unknown level of like, we know Strange is selfish, especially prior to this film. Strange is quite selfish. We see it in his other versions where he's literally, we see at the beginning of this film, Ponytail Strange is literally willing to kill a child if it keeps this power out of this unknown being's hand.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't control it, but I can. Like, it's this very heavy-handed selfishness that the events of this film and also prior stuff has led our Strange, our MCU Strange, to be not as selfish and willing to trust other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very clear that like he realizes that like the fault of the other Stranges is that they aren't willing to trust other people. even if you develop the Illuminati and you don't trust the other members of the Illuminati, you still use the Darkhold and cause an incursion somewhere. Like, that's such a massive thing for me. Is that I just love that the story of Strange is a story of a man who is inherently selfish and narcissistic and breaking away from that. And it also ties in kind of the spiritualness of the original Doctor Strange of, Kathmandu, or no, Karjmataj.
Comertage.
Comertage. Where you have, you have this idea of a spiritual enlightenment for a guy who is very much not spiritually enlightened. And kind of like having to let go of the way you perceive the world and everything like that. Like, of the original Strange, that still plays into it, where Doctor Strange is still who he is as a person. And so part of him trusting America and like believing in her is, I think for a lot of people see that as like a kind of like a super cheap thing. And in a way it is. Like, that solves the problem, is that she just had to like believe in herself, and she needed somebody to believe in her.
Mm-hmm.
Being like a kind of like a cheap out, which, is fair. Like, I get that criticism. I don't think of it that much of that way, but I definitely understand other people do. I had a conversation with my brother-in-law and sister where they made fun of me for not thinking that it was contrived and kind of bogus. So
I think it's simple, or it's a simple solution to tie up a bow, to tie a bow on that story. It's, yeah, but at the same time, I don't know how you visually demonstrate, like, do you just do a training montage of, all right, try and punch stars into the universe? Like, what does that end up like? What is the alternative to to the zombie Strange saying, every time you've done it, you've taken us right where we needed to go. Like, you can control this. I believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself. Like, that whole thing. It's trite, and it has a fun layer of like macabre because it's being, portrayed through a zombie.
He's like missing part of his jaw.
But I think
the zombie, yeah.
And that's like, for me, that's not even like it. The more compelling moment that's happening there is that even Wong in that moment is willing to take the power from this girl, to do what needs to be done, and Strange knowing that.
Oh, and America accepts it too. America, accepts
I guess, yeah. She's even willing to give that up, yeah. But Strange says, no, like, you got this, like, do what you need to do, kind of thing. I think it's a bigger moment for Strange, really. And again, it's almost the like Joel and Ellie kind of moment in Last of Us or something like that. Just again told through a zombie.
It's great. I love that.
Yeah, and it plays as a very nice juxtaposition. Well, it plays as a nice juxtaposition / like wrapping up a fun, interesting thread, in that that's the same body that tried to take the power from her in the first place, and kind of, and showed what a cruel universe Doctor Strange can, or what a cruel person Doctor Strange can be in the multiverse. So it's fun that our Doctor Strange basically like rights that wrong almost. We touched on it.
By the way, that entire let's keep going, because like we need to talk about Zombie Strange as its own thing, because there's so much I want to talk about with Zombie Strange. But yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we mentioned it. The Illuminati, I think, is one of the big like spoilery things in the film, because obviously we get like a bunch of cameos or like alternate universe like heroes. What did you think of the Illuminati?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Holy crap, I loved it, and nothing was better than, hey, there's an odd wheelchair sized like section of the center missing.
Yeah.
And like so let's just go through it real quick here. Mordo introducing them, Black Bolt letting the OG Black Bolt actor come back and reprise his role in a way that shows off like how important his character really could be, is great. Also, it's such a homage to Black Bolt being in the comic book Illuminati. in the comic book Illuminati, you have Black Bolt, Professor Xavier, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man, Tony Stark, as well as Black Panther. Those are those are members of the Illuminati in the comic books, and so getting some like actual Illuminati members in this is great for me. I love that, but also getting Black Bolt, like Black Bolt as it is, and the Inhumans are awesome characters, and I never thought the Inhumans show did right by that, which is unfortunate, but thought that was great. Thought he was great in it. Really enjoyed that, and just kind of going down the line of that. You have Black Bolt, you have Captain Marvel. The Captain Marvel this time around,
Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel,
yeah, which is great because Monica Rambeau is such an awesome character, and her actress is super cool. And like, it's sad that Monica Rambeau in our MCU is dead, literally beating cancer after the blip, only to die from it coming back later. Like sucks. But it's awesome that we get to see her as Captain Marvel. We get Captain Carter, which I thought was super great.
And another what if ish tie-in. Obviously, like this is a different Captain Carter from the what if Captain Carter. But it's obviously like, you know, the same DNA of the character and stuff. So yeah, it was like great to see Haley Atwell get to play that character in live action and, you know, have the I could do this all day kind of moment and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. I have a friend who said he wanted to throw up at that moment, in which case, and I told him, next time I see you, I'm punching you in the throat, saying, how dare you, you son of a bitch. No, I loved that moment. I thought it was great. And then we get fucking John Krasinski as Reed Richards.
Yep.
Like, holy crap. I was talking to my sister, and she said somebody had spoiled that for her, and I'm like, oh, that sucks. Because as somebody who was not spoiled whatsoever about it, it was an amazing reveal.
Yeah.
And he looked great, and I loved like coming out of like a sci-fi like transporter portal to the meeting, because it's like clear he was busy right before he came through.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That was definitely
Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those things that I think had been like teased in leaks and stuff beforehand. So I'd kind of been like prepped for something like that. And then like the day, like if we'd seen it Thursday, I wouldn't have had like confirmation necessarily. But like Friday, John Krasinski was just trending on Twitter, and I was like, well, I can put two and two together. But yeah, I appreciate it. And then also like, just before we end up meeting the Illuminati, when Rachel McAdams is introduced in that universe, she talks about having like a Baxter Fellowship. I'm like, okay, well then, yeah, they've introduced Baxter, so we're clearly about to meet a Fantastic Four person. So yeah, and then of course Professor X rolls in with the
oh my gosh,
the X-Men theme, kind of to highlight his inclusion in largely like animated X-Men regalia. He's wearing, you know, the attire of that version, as well as he's got like the, you know, the electric. I didn't catch, or I wasn't paying close enough attention to realize if it was a hover, you know, wheelchair.
It was hover.
Yeah,
it was a hover wheelchair. Yep.
And
Obviously
that was the one
that
was the one that had been most blatantly teased, because we had heard Sir Patrick Stewart saying, we need to tell him the truth, in the trailers and stuff. But yeah, still, it was fun seeing them all and kind of like getting this like Elseworlds, you know, introduction to these characters, while at the same time knowing that this idea of Wanda being able to dreamwalk into universes and seeing Wanda or Scarlet Witch take over the Wanda Maximoff in that universe has kind of like, knowing that is coming. It was me realizing in that moment, oh, all of these characters are being introduced just to be cannon fodder for Wanda. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. So as soon as all these characters are met, pretty much all of them are killed off.
Oh, and it's such a horror trope to do that. Like, and because by this point in the film, Wanda has become for all intents and purposes, the monster
Oh
of
yeah.
this
Yeah.
horror film. And she's fantastic at it. She has an incredibly important, incredibly and emotional appeal to her, her goal. Everybody, I can't imagine anybody not empathizing with Wanda on some level. And it's like you pointed out to me, I forgot how WandaVision ended.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mentioned that, and yeah, so like yeah, I mentioned the idea that WandaVision ends with like Wanda in the woods reading the Darkhold and hearing her kids. Going back and like listening to that, her kids are asking for help. Um so it's so like that seems to be setting up a potentially different motivation for Wanda than what we actually end up getting. Um I'm gonna hold on a second here because your video is going really, really berserk.
is it
Are
okay?
you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But yeah, your video is all very creepy and messed up right now. So I don't know if you want to hop off and then drop back in.
I'm lost in the multiverse of madness.
Ah.
Yeah, let me hop out and then hop back in.
Cool. Yay, fun.
Is it better?
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it was basically like a whole bunch of framiness and then also like split lines and stuff going crazy. Yeah, it was a I'll probably leave this all in so you can see the playback and just see what kind of madness was going on. But so I was saying, at the end of WandaVision, like Wanda hears her kids calling for help, and I, I think one of my biggest issues with this is seeing, how just like brutally homicidal Wanda is in this, um, in a very disappointing way. I think it was a step back for the character because
I agree.
prior to seeing her in the woods or whatever, she kind of says like, I'm gonna get this under control, I'm gonna take care of myself, and the whole of WandaVision seems to be about her kind of like dealing with this grief and letting it kind of like letting her work past it. And so
Mm-hmm.
this movie in a lot of ways feels like a step back, and that was frustrating. I think Elizabeth Olsen does a great job kind of like portraying the character, but I was very disappointed in just how like just completely unredeemable she is in the amount of people she's willing to kill just for this. And people bring up the point of like, what, like, how do you think this is going to play out, Wanda? Those kids have a mom. Like,
Yep.
you're just going to, it's the same thing that got brought up in Into the Spider-Verse of like, okay, Kingpin, you're just going to steal your wife and child from another Kingpin. How do you think that's going to play out? um
Yeah,
and
no,
so
I
yeah.
think that was such a big one for me as well. Was um that is my biggest like gripe with this movie is I felt WandaVision was such a great moment of this character kind of finding and like making a hard choice for the sake of other people, which is like a big hero moment for the character after she's knowingly and also subconsciously fallen into creating this illusionary world in Westfield. And so I feel like you have like it's not so much of a it is so much as it kind of like a massive step back as far as her character goes, as far as like the heroic elements of her character that we've seen portrayed over the course of several films. Um, and so like that part of me like is upset about um like where Wanda ends up. Now, of course, there was no body shown, so of course, if there's no body, there's no death in the MCU. Like that's a very real possibility. But and I know at the end she does a big redeeming moment where she basically destroys the Darkhold in every universe, because it's intrinsically connected to her, so she can do something about that. That makes total sense for me. Um, but a big level for me was, or on a level that was pretty huge for me was the big kind of let down because my expectations of this film were we were going to get a multiversal romp where Wanda and Doctor Strange try to help America learn to solve her powers and somebody's chasing. And that's kind of what I was anticipating. And at some point, I was anticipating the person who's chasing them does something to either trick Wanda or convince Wanda, to the level where I honestly thought by the end of the film we were going to find out like maybe like the OG Scarlet Witch that we see the tomb of in this movie was like controlling Wanda on some level. But we didn't get that. And so on some level, I appreciate the autonomy that Wanda had to make her decisions in this film, and the like it being like, no, nobody's controlling Wanda. Wanda's making her own choices, and that level of autonomy I appreciate. And so I don't want that to take away from like the autonomy of the character and kind of like her story. I just wish this wasn't the direction and how far down she goes before she makes that, like before she's confronted with the reality, like, yeah, Wanda, you are a monster now. You literally are murdering these, like the murdering the mother of these children that you claim to love. They don't know you. You're not their mother. This other Wanda's their mom. You can't just slip into their lives like this. And I appreciated that, like her, like it really took her being confronted with that, like at face value for it to really hit on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so on some level, I like on one level, I appreciate that. I think that it's great. But on another level, I am disappointed because I don't think that it is a adequate or emotionally appealing path to take Wanda on after WandaVision.
Yeah.
And so like I am split on that. Like I do like I'm like like I am split on it, but when it comes down, sorry for people, audio listeners, I was doing the Larry David GIF thing where he is like weighing his options one hand to the other hand. And it's like and like grimacing while he's doing it. That was what I was doing. Apologize.
And for video listeners, I didn't get that that's what he was doing either. So
that's fair. So video watchers, you guys didn't pick up on that. Now you also have context for what I was doing.
There you go.
But yeah, like this entire thing about it, it's like, yeah, I'm split on it, but I still like it was still done well enough that I was engaged with it and was scared. I was scared for America. I was scared for Strange. I was scared for everybody, because especially when she walks in and oh my God, the way that they makeup and costume had her when she walked into the Illuminati building,
mm-hmm.
and she is just covered in, like, once again, Sam Raimi at his peak, doing everything he can to make everything look like blood and guts and gore, but not let it be blood and guts and gore, to keep that PG-13 rating. Just like masterful, especially with the way Wanda walks in. She has it like, her hair is like thick with the oil, like bloody oil from Ultron bots. And she's just like walking barefoot. It's so horror tropey on so many levels, but I just absolutely loved it. And just the way that and she's such a badass because she just says, and also shout out to Reed Richards thinking he's so smart just to fuck over Black Bolt.
Yeah.
With one whisper, Black Bolt can tear you to shreds. And it's like, with what mouth?
Yeah.
And it's just such a great moment.
Yeah.
Because and then his brain implodes on itself, and it's like, oh my gosh, that was so violent, and then she just ups the violence from there.
Yeah, that's like, and again, I like being able to identify that that's what's coming, and just seeing how they execute all of those deaths effectively, was like, I think that's where like this movie is at the campy level that I'm like okay with, and like was like, okay, like I don't like, the hyper violence and stuff, but they're doing it in in very like PG-13 ways, where obviously like Black Bolt, the reverberations explode his head from the inside out basically, and it's especially funny, I think, just because of that character. It's like, hey, the Inhumans actually mattered. Oh no, they don't. But also I appreciate that they were smart in that they set up what Black Bolt can do by the backstory of he killed Strange. He killed that universe's Strange.
Which, by the way, for a single moment between this character who we really don't care about in Black Bolt and this other Strange that we already know is dead, that I'm sorry actually like hit me in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like I'm like, oh wow, I like didn't expect, like I knew they were gonna kill him because like that's totally set up that way, but I didn't expect for this like I'm sorry moment to be like actually impactful all of a sudden. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
I'm like, do I care about Black Bolt and the Inhumans? What is this?
I will say that, like, as somebody who has watched the entirety of the Inhumans series, in part for, like, I watched part of it for that D Plus show, and then I just like was like, all right, I might as well just like watch. It's what, like 12 episodes or whatever. I'll just watch the whole thing. Watch them. I think Black Bolt is the one that like has the best character in that. Well, you got really dark all of a sudden. Okay. He's turning something on or off. Oh, his light's dying again. This happens every now and then on this podcast. But yeah, I like, I think Black Bolt was one of the ones that like actually got a good, they delved into his backstory enough that I was able to appreciate kind of Black Bolt's power and the curse of that power, because he basically kills his parents in the Inhuman series through the same means. So yeah, just kind of trying to stall while Cam finishes getting set up.
Sorry about that. My my ring light fell off the wall.
Yeah.
So I had to put it back. Anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, no, okay, well, yeah, that's interesting.
But yes, then obviously we get like Black Bolt dies, and then it's like, okay, we're off to the races. She very much, threatens John Krasinski, Reed Richards, with like, do you have, or he says like, I've got kids, I know, like, and she's like, is their mother alive? Okay, then there will be someone to take care of them, and just like dismantles him.
Well, I didn't realize it until somebody pointed it out. I read online, they're like, what she did is, because Reed Richards is basically like can bounce back any damage done externally, she inflated him. She literally inflates him to the point where like his rubbery body like splits into pieces, like splits into like ribbons, and then eventually his head pops.
Okay.
And we see like the red mist of his brain getting popped.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't catch that was like her inflating him or whatever, but I saw like very much dismantling his body, or like, yeah, like kind of peeling his body apart, and then the head explosion. Yeah, I caught that at least. Yeah,
it's wild.
Popping him like a balloon. Yeah.
God. And then Captain Carter has like some amazing moments where we get to see her show off. She has a jetpack. It's great. And then it does something that I think is far more effective, which is it shows us like every implication that she's been cut in half by the shield, without actually us being shown that she was cut in half by the shield.
Yeah.
Which is just fantastic.
And even Marvel, even that ends up being like, that is a in the zombies episode of What If, they effectively do the same thing with the shield with zombie Captain, in that one it's still Captain America, but he's a zombie, and so like Winter Soldier and your light's gone again. Winter Soldier basically like throws the shield at him, and like pins his torso to a subway car, and very clearly like cut him in half. So it was like, yep, I know exactly what just happened. And it goes back to the thing I occasionally bring up when we talk about the physics of that shield, is sometimes that shield just bounces right off a person. Other times it will cut them in half. Okay, sure. Why not? Whatever.
Yep. It's an inconsistent logic with how the shield works.
Yep. But it's another gruesome death.
The only thing I can think of is if you know what you're doing and you angle it correctly, you can angle it so it hits, instead of hitting the like ridge where it will cut somebody in half, it hits like the flat right above it, is the only thing I can think of that you could explain that away with. But even then,
yeah,
like the centrifugal force of being hit by a shield that could cut you in half even if you're getting hit by the blunt, like by a blunt part of it,
Yeah.
that's still probably enough to like absolutely kill you.
Yeah, it's like Baron Zemo gets knocked out by a blow to the head from the shield in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then he's fine a couple minutes later, and here just straight through Captain Carter. Okay.
Like it's literally, I think, the most inconsistent thing in the MCU is that shield, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Captain Marvel basically just gets absolutely like brutally like beaten down and murdered,
crushed by a statue.
Yeah, crushed by a statue, which is just very Raimi-esque in so many ways, but also just like weird that that's how like one of the most powerful characters in the MCU gets taken out.
I mean, it was very much that exercise in like who wins the fight between blah 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 and blah blah blah. Whoever the screenwriter wants to win the fight.
Exactly.
in the in the same in the very next scene, the mental battle between Scarlet Witch and Professor X. And she just snaps his neck in his mind, and he slumps over there dead.
Dude, like demonic Scarlet Witch in the Mindscape, so good, like so cool. And also like 100% like could step on me, like let's do this. Like gosh, she's so great. So yeah. Elizabeth Olsen's so amazing.
Illuminati set up in an interesting way to show just how powerful that Wanda is. Although I would argue, and I've seen this criticism as well, like we knew she was powerful. We didn't really need that. And so it ends up just kind of being like, well, I guess I hope it doesn't set a precedent of, well, if we ever need to kill somebody off, we can just hop into a different multiverse and kill that version of them or something like that. In that vein, like there's this theory going around that like, okay, well, if, in the eventual Fantastic Four movie, does this mean that John Krasinski is going to be in that movie, or or was this just a one-off to placate the fan casting? And now we've done it. Now we've seen him as Mr. Fantastic, and now we can do a different Mr. Fantastic storyline.
I don't know. I think that will depend on a lot of different factors of how they want to play with the Fantastic Four film that's in production.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that. Let me think here. I'm trying to think, and yeah, no. I think for as far as how we didn't need her doing that, I think that's fair. But I also think that like something to remind people is they knew that this Wanda, like this Scarlet Witch, was in the body of their Wanda Maximoff.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that more as and my interpretation of that is much more as like a hostage negotiation from the approach that Reed Richards and everybody was having.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we can destroy you, but please don't force us to kill our Wanda. And Wanda being like, you've made a massive mistake by trying to negotiate, and then absolutely wrecks them for it. Mm-hmm. So I see that level of on that level of that kind of understanding, well, why didn't they just absolutely destroy her? It's like, because absolutely destroying her would kill their Wanda. And that's not what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's very clear that these Illuminati people are quote unquote heroes.
Yeah.
Even though they exist only to make sure if they encounter a Doctor Strange, they murder him.
Yeah. It was definitely interesting kind of playing with some of those elements. And it's the second act of the film kind of thing. So again, I think it's also the it is the horror trope of you got to have the villain, the monster, kill a bunch of people. And if it can be people that and care about, then all the better. So yeah, take out some people that we know and care about, take out some fan favorite casting and cameos and stuff like that. And then back to the other, multiverses and stuff like that. Speaking of the multiverse, what did you think of the multiverses that we end up kind of getting in this film?
Loved them. I liked them a lot. I love America when she goes, the most important thing you got to figure out is food.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, pizza is usually the best way to go. And I'm like, first off, I love that. I love that she's like in this, and she's like, here, pizza balls. And I'm like, my first thought was, those look delicious. I would like a pizza ball. And then it's just it's great. I wish that we could have spent more time in some of those multiverses where especially some of the really more interesting ones. But I understand like we didn't get the romp through the multiverse that I thought we were going to get, so it's fine that we didn't get it.
Yeah.
Like 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 you can tease it a little bit, make me wish we had it, but I appreciate them not spending so much time going through it only for it to not matter.
Yeah.
So
And that's where like for me the visually interesting aspects of this film I think were dampened by not doing more multiverse hopping or something like that. So like the most we get is kind of like the the one or two shots where we see characters spending a half a second in a bunch of different multiverses, and that was a cool little sequence, but it was one sequence versus like the various different fights that we got in the mirror dimension and stuff like that in the first film. So I thought that was where I would have been like, oh, it would have been cool to just spend a little bit more time in a few of those instead of oh, we like she seems to keep landing on this rooftop in New York, but it's just a different New York. And this one, yeah, has pizza balls, and you go on red and stop on green, and those little variations. And then the one obviously that they go to where just straight up incursion stuff has happened,
mhm.
or that Strange and Christine get sent to. Um, uh, so let's I guess kind of jumping off of that, let's talk about the musical fight, because I think you enjoyed this one way more than I did.
I think I enjoyed it. I think more than everybody did. I have not heard a single person talk about it in like a positive, like a highly positive manner, the way that I felt about it. I might be alone in this universe between me and Sam Raimi, who thought that was an awesome sequence.
I think they're definitely some of the kind of funny crew that really enjoyed that fight, based on their in review that I've not listened to all of it yet, but like they talk about that part with very glowing flavor. At least like I think Kevin and Tim do.
Yeah, that's it. Like Kevin and Tim do. That's it. But
Yeah.
like outside of the three of us, I don't know anybody else who's talked highly of.
Mm-hmm. I will also I mean another one I've seen was Dan Merle, I think, who enjoyed it in his review as well.
It was just
I
it's a cool visualization, especially with like
yeah.
Doctor Strange in the first film. We see he has ties to music, and
I will say that's definitely not a thing I thought about until I think you and I were talking about it after seeing it. Is like, oh yeah, he does like he does he does play kind of the guessing game with the songs, and historically he's a classically trained pianist and stuff. So
Mhm.
like he definitely has that musical background. I think that just hadn't been like reinforced in this movie, so it feels like
Mhm.
it comes out of nowhere, or is just like a fun visual style to do this fight in a way that doesn't feel motivated if you don't like remember those little Easter eggy details. I mean, yeah, visually it's very like interesting, and it's fun kind of like seeing the score kind of like play as a feud, as a duel between these two characters. And they have some very fun stings in it. It was just a very like it was the like I would say the next level of campy where I'm like, I'm okay with this, but I also didn't need this.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was kind of like my thoughts on it. It was an interesting way to have Doctor Strange's fight that wasn't just like magic circles or them like summoning demon creature parts or something like we'd seen Strange do earlier in the film and stuff. Like it added a different flair, but I don't know if it holds up for me against the fights from Doctor Strange 1, for example.
I think the fights in Doctor Strange 1 are, because they are much more magical duels between people with like at least competent levels of magical skill.
Mhm.
I think are incredibly entertaining, and in a lot of ways a lot more fun. But I also look at it as I also look at it within kind of like the idea that your regular magic stuff's not gonna work, because we see them use the regular magic stuff on the demon that's summoned at the beginning of the film in like the beholder type beast that's in New York and tearing it up. And we see like, conventional magic stuff can work on it, but it's not like as effective as it is as we've seen magic be before. And I think that it also kind of sets up a level of, especially when you talk about witchcraft versus sorcery. Sorcery is much more of this mathematical kind of like level of science where, especially chaos magic for witchcraft, is much more um, innate and natural to the user. Um, and I think that what they, especially with what they showed off in WandaVision, with how powerful chaos magic can be, and how like domineering and just overall much more powerful. Where magic, sorcery magic, it seems there has to be intent and scope to what you're doing with it, which means like the things that get more complicated and take more effort and more knowledge and more practice to use require that, versus a much more like latent ability that Wanda has innately within her to use magic, and then that's enhanced again by the Darkhold, which just makes her chaos magic so much more powerful. And so when it comes to like, yeah, were the magic duels in Doctor Strange 1 more interesting? 100%. And on a lot of levels more entertaining, but I don't think witchcraft versus sorcery plays out like sorcery versus sorcery, or witchcraft versus witchcraft like we saw in WandaVision. Like, these things do play into each other different enough that like I saw it as being a very different kind of fighting,
Yeah,
and I did enjoy that.
I guess like this is the first one we get like sorcery, especially in those first couple fights in the first act, sorcery against demon creatures and stuff like that. I don't think that was necessarily like sorcery versus magic so much as like we just haven't seen Strange take on these kinds of enemies.
Hmm.
And you know, and Defender Strange with the ponytail, yeah, can't really do it alone as they're trying to kind of, you know, make through their way through the gap world or whatever towards the Book of Ashanti. And so like he kind of gets overwhelmed and stuff, whereas like our Doctor Strange with Wong, they're able to kind of tag team it and take out, you know, big Gargantos thing, which I guess I was kind of thinking it in the moment, but it wasn't until like seeing kind of a side by side comparison afterwards of like, oh yeah, this is very like it the climax of that battle is very much the Starro fight from the Suicide Squad last year of like, oh yep, just stab the thing in the eye, of course, and get a gross out gag to kind of wrap up the battle. But yeah, I think
And then they go get pizza. It's great.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, by the end, I mean, like I guess still my thinking there is the visual. I guess maybe I just like the Inception nature of a lot of
Hmm.
the sequences from the first movie more than I enjoyed what they did in this one.
I would agree with you on that. I like, once again, I think that it's more visually and more entertaining in the first film than we got here.
Yeah.
Because essentially, since Wanda's so powerful, a lot of fights just end up being super one sided.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get like that back and forth that you get in the first film. And like I said, magical duels are just more fun to watch than like an absolute beatdown by Wanda on all the sorcerers. Like, it just is what that is. I don't think that it's this movie is lessened for it, but I definitely think like if your expectation was we're gonna see more of those intricate levels of like, oh, I'm losing this fight, cool, let's go to the mirror dimension.
Yeah, it was the
And
kind of thing like
yeah.
we it's almost like I guess I would expect the like the fight sequence that we got from No Way Home between Doctor Strange and Peter. I almost expected at least once to kind of like explore that kind of dynamic, and they do to the slightest degree. Like it's not Strange versus Wanda, but like they do trap Wanda in that like mirror thing that then she breaks out using the reflections and stuff, and that's a cool little sequence. That you know,
Leads up to an awesome
also
horror
shows,
moment though.
yeah, it shows how powerful she is and stuff. Um, yeah. So I think the last thing I have that I would want to circle around to and obviously you mentioned it earlier, is the zombie Doctor Strange that we get to kind of like close out the film. I should have seen it coming when they bury that, that one in New York, but I love the reveal of like, didn't say it like, I'm gonna dreamwalk into another Strange. Don't you have to be in that world? Don't have to be alive in that world. And realizing that like, oh yeah, no, he's just gonna warg himself into that zombie body from the beginning. I was like, okay, yep, I guess that's where we're going with this. I loved
which
the
is which is super super Sam Raimi,
oh
Army
yeah,
of Dead,
absolutely,
like
yeah.
yeah, old
That
school horror Sam Raimi, 100%.
Yeah, I liked how that Strange, like, and how Christine basically tells Strange, like, their spirits use them kind of thing, and turns the demon spirits into like the cloak of levitation in that universe, or for that version of him. I love Wong.
My brother-in-law called it the Cloak of Souls,
There you go.
and that to me has been like the coolest like name for it.
Hmm.
I loved it. I love that entire section, especially with when the spirits invade through Strange's eyes
Hmm.
to get to where they are, and Christine uses a thing that Doctor Strange didn't know how to use in the first film.
Yeah, that was what I pointed out. Because I had just seen the movie the night before.
Yeah.
I pointed out that the thing she uses to like blast the souls away is a thing that Strange attempted to use at Caecilius in the first movie, and Caecilius is like, "You don't know how to use that, do you?" He's like, "No."
Which is we know how powerful it was from, because I went back and watched that scene. We know how powerful that is because Caecilius almost shit his pants when Strange pulled that on him, and then he realized Strange doesn't know how to use it.
Hmm.
And then like that's an amazing moment, and call back to it, and it's like cool. So Christine knows things because it's very clear this Christine was much more in like part of this idea of taking the world of sorcery and bring it into like the rest of the world on whatever level they did that with, to the point where like
Yeah,
Doctor Strange has like
she studied the sands of whatever that basically like are able to like block his powers and stuff, and was able to kind of like like combine that with technology to basically neuter his abilities and stuff. So yeah, she's very
yeah,
clearly in the know in this universe.
which is great. And also like her having like bright red hair rather than like the blonde hair, like blonde brownish hair. It's like cool. Touch on it, like it's like, yeah, in the multiverse sometimes people have different hair colors. Neat. I dig it.
Sure. I loved Juan basically seeing Zombie Strange and being like, I don't even want to know.
Yep.
Again, Wong just the MVP for his moments in this one. It continues to be a delight. And yeah, as cheesy and campy as that like final bit is, I'm like, okay, like I don't have a problem with like America just having to like believe in herself to use her ability, because I think it's she is the least important character having a transformational moment in that sequence.
Mhm.
Strange has one, and then like she uses it to cause one in Wanda to basically like bring her back to Earth and say like, you've become the monster that, and they've seen it now, so you're never gonna win them over. Um, so yeah, I appreciated that, despite there being elements of it where I was just like, yep, this is definitely a Sam Raimi movie.
I will say something about her. It's very, for me, the thing that really tied me into it, it's like, oh, it's not that she can use the power when she's scared. It's that she's scared of the power. Is when they walk down that like the memory lane, which once again, Sam Raimi ass moment.
How convenient, yeah.
Yeah, how incredibly plot contrived and convenient is it that in this multiverse world they have the ability to like just take a look at people's memories,
Mm-hmm.
and we get that, and we see, and for me it's like, oh, she can't control her power not because her power is not controllable. She can't control her power because she's scared of it.
Yeah.
And
First time
she's
she triggered
scared.
it, she sent it. I will say like I was surprised that the movie ended and we didn't like, and it wasn't her going into that universe to find her parents. But also I will shout out, and I don't like necessarily doing this, because I think Disney tries to kind of like get the pat on the back too much for it. But I will shout out that they have basically insisted that they will not be editing the characters, kind of the lesbian parents out of the film, even though as I was watching it, I was like, oh look, it's a perfectly like, cuttable bit of backstory for this character that could just be alluded to and whatnot. So I will say I appreciate that they've refused to do that, and as such, like the film's not playing in Saudi Arabia and stuff like that, and I don't think it's going to get a Chinese release either. But shout out to them for actually like sticking to the guns on representation this time.
They might. The only time that I know China has had a, like, the way that it's unique in the way that China censors LGBTQ stuff is that the only times they'll censor it is if it makes people look weak. Like if they won't allow something that shows a gay man being effeminate. Because like there's Chinese propaganda in regards to LGBTQ stuff where like as long as men are still being seen as masculine, they don't have a problem with it. That's their issue, is that they want men to be seen as masculine, women to be seen as feminine. So I don't see that being an issue with China.
As I understand it, though, China has not granted a release for Doctor Strange, so
which that doesn't surprise me just because of other reasons.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things about it that I could totally see them not letting it through. Like they didn't let Shang-Chi through. So like that is its own kind of like commentary that we could get into another time. But like China can sometimes just like, they only let in, I think it's like 10 or 12 movies a year from foreign theaters.
No, it's way more than that. But yeah, we don't need to dive down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that they seem to be committed to letting this character's kind of past and backstory. I didn't catch in the film in the moment, but like apparently she's also wearing like a rainbow pin and has like "Amor is Amor" on her shirt and stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's cool. And I didn't catch this, but I was reading something that apparently the character herself is LGBTQ, which I was not aware of. But yeah, shout out to that and representation, and Disney seemingly actually like sticking to their guns on representation this time, instead of just being like, yeah, we can cut that out.
Which is great, especially after Rise of Skywalker. That was such a massive complaint that I had about this like entirely cuttable moment of like two women kissing, and it's like, gosh. And
or like,
so
I didn't see it, but I understand the Secrets of Dumbledore recently has a similar like very very beautiful but very easily edited out for foreign audiences kind of scene between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. So yeah.
Yeah, no. So what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. Anyway, so I really love and appreciated the fact that they have stuck with this. Like, this is an intrinsic part of her character, of who she is. She's from a world where this isn't prejudiced against, and on top of that, I loved that she brings up that this Doctor Strange doesn't know Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
When she says something in Spanish, and Strange goes, "What?" and she goes, "In this world, you don't speak Spanish?"
Yeah, and Wong does, and I enjoyed that little bit. Yeah, and I enjoyed that even like we were introduced to Defender Strange and America speaking Spanish to one another. And I was like, oh, that's a cool thing. So like, which also makes me realize, since we're seeing that as our Doctor Strange's dream, did he just not understand what was happening within his own dream? Did he just like, or was he getting subtitles in his own dream? Who knows?
I actually like the idea of that, is that he just had a dream in Spanish and has no idea what happened in it.
Yeah.
Because he'd be like, it'd be interesting, because it's like, if he could speak Spanish, would he have understood like what was going on in that dream enough to like know why she was in his dream even? It's great. I love it.
I also liked the idea that dreams are windows to the multiverse. I like that as a like a cool theory, and the ways that gets introduced a couple times of like Wong basically saying like, so you're saying that when I'm being chased by a clown, that's actually happening somewhere, okay? And then also our evil Doctor Strange at the end basically being like all those times you dreamt about falling off something very far, that was probably me. It's like,
Such a good moment.
yeah.
Such a good moment because like it's such a touchstone to, like, yeah, we've all had dreams like that. We've all had nightmares like that. It's like like this Doctor Strange being like, Darkhold Strange telling Doctor Strange that like, you ever have those dreams? It was like, it's like this guy's been going around and murdering people in the multiverse, and that's wild to me. Because it's just like this is a homicidal maniac Strange, which I love. Gosh, yeah, and then we get the what was it? It was also like, but yeah, so Zombie Strange for me is just top tier. I absolutely adore and love Zombie Strange. I love the design, the character, like the design of it, the way that his like hand is like halfway falling apart while he's doing the hands movements is just awesome. Just there's so many things about it that I just like, I really adored. It played directly into the Sam Raimi Evil Dead level zombies.
He definitely had decomposed more than I was anticipating him to have decomposed by that point. Yeah. I was like,
yeah, I don't think
you're already way far gone. You are super zombie mode compared to the, very much alive version of you that we saw a day ago. Yeah.
But also the entire thing about like bending the souls of the dead into becoming a cloak for him. And then using those, like the cloak of souls, in a way that's different than the cloak of levitation. Like the way he uses it is different than the way he uses the cloak of levitation in other universes, or like that Doctor Strange normally uses. And I love that. I love that aspect of it. I love the Wong. Like, I don't even want to know. Like, such great moment. And then the macabre of like a jaw hanging off of it, like off of its hinges on one side, looking at a girl and telling her empathetically with just tons of emotion, like, you just gotta believe in yourself. And it's just like oh my gosh, it's such a like weird campy moment, but I love it. And here's the thing, like I said at the top of the show, I'm a Sam Raimi fan. I'm especially a Sam Raimi horror fan. The Cloak of Souls and the Souls of the Dead were like straight pulled from Drag Me to Hell, which is a movie he did like a decade ago. That was fantastic. But it's like a classic horror film. And so it's just seeing these elements of his repertoire getting kind of put in here. And you also have like the musical score of Danny Elfman accompanying this entire film, which is, it makes this Doctor Strange movie entirely unique to the entirety of the MCU. And I was talking to my brother-in-law and he said, the thing I love, one of the reasons why I love Ant-Man so much is it's a heist movie with superheroes in it. And there was a lot about this film this is a horror movie, like an interdimensional horror sci-fi flick with superheroes in it. And there's that aspect of this film I really love. And I really love that we're getting more and more of these, which is we're seeing the types of stories getting explored in ways that we normally haven't been able to see before.
Yeah, I remember like going back to at least like The Winter Soldier, where that one was like a spy, government spy thriller, but with superheroes. Like that was one of the first ones where I was like, oh yeah, like the superhero genre can be other genres, but with superheroes. And yeah, like Ant-Man was a heist movie and a comedy with superheroes, or like, Guardians of the Galaxy was a space opera with superheroes and stuff like that. So, yeah, lots of fun. And certainly like it was inevitable that they would eventually delve into a horror. And even before Sam Raimi was attached to this, back when it was still the original director, Scott Derrickson, it had been pitched as, we're doing a dark horror film in the MCU. And I remember like at the time being like, oh, I don't know how much I enjoy that. But now we've done it, so maybe we can not have to worry about doing it again or something.
You said you were looking away during those like very telegraphed jump scares. Yeah. I was looking forward to them. Yeah. I was so excited for them.
Yeah. One of the things that I appreciate, like I appreciate it in a weird meta way, is realizing that and kind of knowing this about the just the timeline of the films. The original plan when this was supposed to come out before
Mhm.
Spider-Man, would have been that America was like the reason she's training there at Kamertage at the end is she would have basically been the Ned Portal part of
That makes sense.
Spider-Man No Way Home. But since this one got pushed, they basically just rewrote Ned's part to be like, yeah, you're a little magic, and so Ned ends up being the one to
Hey,
open the
I love
portals
that.
instead.
I think that's great. I think
Mhm.
it's great, even though Ned and MJ did get kind of written out, but it done in like a beautiful way that makes me cry still.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, Ned being a little bit of magic, love it. Love a
Yeah.
little magic Ned. He's
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, it was like fun seeing this movie end still with the idea of that being like the setup, and also clearly they threw in like the little bit of the scene with America and Wong and Doctor Strange about like what experience do you have with the multiverse? Oh well, we had this thing recently with Spider-Man and the whole like
Oh
run
my gosh,
of
she's the
Spider-Man
Spider-Man.
stuff. Yeah,
Just like, does he? Has the
which does
ability
he
to
shoot
the
web
spider
out his
shoots
butt?
web. Butt?
Yeah, yeah.
He shoots web out of his butt. No,
No.
wait.
I mean, I hope not. I don't know.
I hope not. I don't know.
Which
Like,
also, like the meta-ness there of Sam Raimi obviously being the one that did the organic web shooters.
mhm.
Yeah. There were
And
definitely
like
like
the
little nods to
complaint people
all
had.
sorts of
Yeah,
Sam
yeah.
Raimi stuff because there were also a couple moments in that opening fight scene just before all that where I was like, oh, that looks like. I chuckled when like the cab goes through the building or whatever. I was like, hey, it's like Spider-Man 2. And stuff like that.
It's using its tentacles to climb up the side
Yeah.
of this bank building.
Yeah.
Right out of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
Speaking of, what did you think of the Bruce Campbell cameo? I guess we can wrap up on that.
Great. I mean, anything with Bruce Campbell's great.
Yeah.
Especially since it leads up to her being like making a meta commentary about like food costing money, like doesn't really happen in most universes. They figured out how to give free food.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, and then immediately he goes, hey, you didn't pay for that.
Yeah.
And her being like, oh, I guess it's not free here.
Mm-hmm.
Is just fantastic. And then also the way that it's just the absolute best part of that cameo is Strange doing the thing where his hand is hitting him.
Yeah.
Because that's
obviously Evil Dead. Yeah.
Evil Dead. That's such a massive
That
Evil
is
Dead
why
reference.
Bruce Campbell has a career is because of how well he did that in Evil Dead.
like having to cut off his own hand in Evil Dead 2 is like leading up to the chainsaw hand, and then the whole the entire existence of both Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell's career being a meta joke of a pizza ball salesman the pizza papa.
Yeah.
Which just choice with that. Being like the pizza papa having to hit himself for 3 weeks is, and then like at the very end with the meta looking at the camera, it's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is terrific. Also, I think that ties in directly to a very horror trope of everything's totally fine at the end, and then at the very last moment, it's not. It's bad.
Yeah, he gets that third eye that comes out, and then like by the mid-credit scene, it's like, oh, he's got it under control. He's fine, and he's ready to go on adventure with Charlize Theron in her new MCU role that seems to be setting up Doctor Strange 3. I definitely can't tell you much about her character because I don't know it, but I did like watch here's what the ending of Doctor Strange means. And she's playing Clea, who seems to be a character that like Doctor Strange marries in the comics and stuff like that. And they're going to go off on some kind of adventure in the dark dimension. It seems like, so cool.
She is a lot.
She's like the niece of Dormammu, I guess, is another thing that I saw. I was like, okay, that's neat. Sure. I'll be curious to see if that ties back to the first movie.
In a lot of the comics, especially the original run, she originally is the apprentice of Doctor Strange, and later after they go through their storyline where they basically fall in love. That's the kind of connection there. So getting her looks awesome.
Yeah.
She's immediately doing dimension hopping. The dimension behind her looks like the Dormammu.
Yeah. Dark dimension.
The dark dimension. So I'm super stoked for that. I love Charlize Theron. I don't think she does much if anything wrong. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'll be curious to see if it's another 6 years before we get our Doctor Strange 3 or not, but we'll see.
Maybe, man. We
And he's
like
gonna
it.
have he's gonna have that third eye as like the trade-off for using the Darkhold, I guess.
I know that Benedict Cumberbatch mentioned publicly that he was taking a break, so like from acting. So it might be a couple of years before we still see. I mean, of course, it's gonna. The Marvel slate has already been like etched, so
Yeah.
we know that we're not going to get a Doctor Strange movie until at least the next phase.
Interesting. I'd not seen anything of him taking. I'd seen like Andrew Garfield's taking a break from acting. I hadn't heard anything from Benedict Cumberbatch, but cool.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I think my final thoughts are, if you've watched this film, you saw it. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to this podcast where we kind of gushed and talked about a lot of stuff. I think that this has been pretty much an overly positive podcast kind of review of the film. I think that, like we mentioned, the flaws and problems with it earlier. I think that those are like not significant, but those are like important things to mention. That there is this is not a perfect film, but I'm really happy with what we got. I'm really happy that if this is the first entry we get of horror in the MCU, I look forward to seeing what else we could possibly get and that kind of like that genre, because horror is such a for such a shallow film genre as far as like content goes. Horror has such a variety of offerings. Like I would love, love, love to see a ghost story, but with MCU and super. I think that'd be. I hope that we can delve more into these types of genres and dig more into telling, like, I'm going to say, because it's weird, because in comic books, these stories are pretty traditional, like getting a bunch of different kinds of genres into superhero comics is super normal. But when I say not these non-traditional stories, I really mean for the MCU, non-traditional MCU type stories. Like this isn't going to be a superhero team up movie. I would love to just see more of just these like genre pivoting moves with superheroes. I think would just be absolutely, and I hope we get.
Yeah. As you said that, your video went all crazy again. It's back now. You're fine.
I was about to say, I'm trapped in the multiverse of madness. Oh,
yeah.
I'm in the mirror dimension.
Definitely looked like a something dimension. All right, well, that will do it for this episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to talk all things Doctor Strange. It was definitely fun seeing it with you and chatting with you about it a little bit afterwards. And I will be curious to see where they go with the character next. I hope it's less horror and more back into like the psychedelic side of things, but
I hope so too.
I'm open to whatever. I'll give it a shot. Yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Let's go around the metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Cam at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a pretty huge shout out to That Bond Show. I know you gave a shout out to it at the beginning of the show. But I really think that, as it's coming to a close, you guys have about 5 more films left to do. It is a kind of like, we're kind of in the swan song of things with it, where we're going to be saying goodbye to the show soon, which is in its own way a little sad, but at the same time, I'm pretty happy with like, it's been great seeing you go through the Bond films in a way that has been just like very fun. And being a part of it with some of the Bond review stuff has been a lot of fun, and just watching off the side, like seeing your reaction to some of the films has been a lot of fun. Yeah, and just like it's a tremendous show. It's taken a lot of effort from both you and Logan, and getting this together, and you guys have just done a stellar job. So I really hope people go and check out it, especially if you're like, I don't really like the old Bond films. I hope you go check out the Bond reviews that we're going to be doing going forward as we close out the franchise.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will give a shout out to That D Plus Show. Cameron and I did most recently, as we mentioned earlier. We did our Moon Knight season 1 wrap up kind of discussion last week. This week will probably be this week's going to be a look at the 2-parter premiere of Star Wars Rebels in honor of last week's May the 4th. And then we'll have Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers and the Obi-Wan Kenobi series to wrap up the month here in May. So go check those out every Friday for new episodes on That D Plus Show. Well, I say that a couple of those episodes come out, or those movies come out on Friday, so we might shift some schedule stuff around later in the month, but you can find it, That D Plus Show, either on YouTube or on podcast services, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. That's where you can find everything from us, as well as at That Nerdy Site on Twitter. If you liked what you heard, please, once again, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.